So in my last video I discussed Superman's free film arc and why it essentially didn't work. In this video I want to continue with the DCEU films and this time discuss the planned Justice League trilogy and whether it would have actually worked. As more and more fans get behind the release of the Snyder Cut movement, I thought instead of focusing on this movement, perhaps I should look into the original story outline for Snyder and Terrio's planned trilogy of Justice League films and the Superman 5-film story arc. Before I continue, I've been posting a lot of videos on this channel lately. It would really help if you do subscribe if you're enjoying the content on this channel. I'm really trying to get the subscriber numbers up, so if you are enjoying this channel, please do subscribe. So first of all, let's cast our minds back to October 2014, 1 year since the release of Man of Steel. Warner Brothers announced they were moving ahead with a cinematic universe and announced a huge slate of films to rival the MCU. Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League Part 1, The Flash, Aquaman, Shazam, Justice League Part 2, Cyborg and Green Lantern were all announced. Of these 10 films, 7 were made, with the Cyborg and Green Lantern films production essentially closing and The Flash being completely stuck in development, with a revolving door of directors coming in and out. Spirits were high that Batman vs Superman was going to be a huge financial and critical success and springboard the DCEU into life, and setting up various plot threads which were going to be picked up in the Justice League films, mainly the nightmare scene and the Flash's time travel abilities. As the original slate showed, Justice League was going to be part 1 of 2 and be released in back-to-back years in similar fashion to Infinity War and Endgame, telling one large story over 2 films, with a third film to close off this story if everything was successful. So what happened? Well, Batman vs Superman was not the financial or critical success Warner Brothers hoped it would be. With Justice League production having already started under Snyder's vision, there was a rush to edit the film in order to address the major criticisms of Batman vs Superman, mainly the dark tone and lack of humour, something which Snyder said he would have added to the films as he continued his original vision, which I highly doubt. Warner Brothers heavily edited Snyder's original film to be more of a standalone film instead of a part 1 or 3. Whilst this probably was a wise decision, the changes are majorly evident and it seriously hampers your enjoyment of the film. Whilst Justice League is probably a better film than Batman vs Superman, I prefer rewatching Batman vs Superman because at least it's a vision I can tell all production staff and actors were on board with. It's a big swing and a miss, but at least it's a swing. This is a similar reason I don't like Ant-Man all that much, because I can tell it's not really Peyton Reed's film. I don't know whose vision I'm watching. Is it Peyton Reed's or Edgar Wright's? So at last we got the heavily altered Justice League, which was released to a mixed response and effectively ended Zack Snyder's relationship with Warner Brothers and the DCEU, and his ideas were abandoned and left on the cutting room floor. So what was the plan for Snyder's Justice League trilogy? Well, little was known, but an overview of Snyder's ideas are available. However, I will add I don't actually believe many of Snyder's quotes for his ideas for the DCEU, as he has said, after his 3 films were critical failures, and it's very easy with hindsight to say the ideas which will resonate the best with fans in order to get them on side. Anyways, here is the outline of the story Snyder planned to tell. It's important to remember also Snyder never actually wrote these scripts for Justice League 2 and 3, this is just the ideas Snyder had. So originally, let's look at the Snyder Cut Justice League. This film planned to have up to 10 additional comic characters added to the film, most notably Ryan Choi, also known as the Atom, and Calvin Swanwick was to be revealed to be Martian Manhunter the whole time, which I highly doubt was true. Superman was heavily altered and it looked almost certain in the Snyder Cut we were going to get the black suit, seemingly confirmed by Henry Cavill, and we would have seen a more unhinged Superman. Darkseid would have been teased at the other end of the boob tube Steppenwolf used throughout the film, setting him up as the main villain in Justice League 2 after Steppenwolf's defeat. Batman was to die in Justice League 2, the Green Lanterns would have been introduced as well, which would have made sense after this line in the trailer.
No lanterns. You're Kryptonian.
Nightmare scene from Batman vs Superman would have played a more prominent role in future films. Snyder's plans for the Nightmare future was loosely inspired by the plot of the 2013 video game Injustice: Gods Among Us. Justice League would have also been inspired by the comic Final Crisis. Justice League 2 was supposed to end in defeat, similar to Infinity War, setting up Justice League 3 to be set entirely in the Nightmare sequence from Batman vs Superman, where I imagine the League would defeat Darkseid, losing Batman in the process, and Flash perhaps reverse in time to reset the universe in some way. Now the comic book nerd in me thinks this sounds fantastic. I think this is a really interesting arc for the Justice League, if not a bit rushed, to go for the Infinity War style plot when DC had only just begun their universe, whilst MCU had 10 years of setup before attempting a storyline of this scale. However, hearing that my favourite superheroes would be interacting this way in these large comic book style storylines does put a smile on my face, and I would have loved to have seen these films and this arc, and most fans are in agreement they wish Snyder was given the backing to attempt this ambitious story. But would it have worked, and would it have been good? A lot of fans seem to think that these films would have been incredible and Snyder should have been allowed to make them. Well, obviously there is no way of knowing if these films that never got made would have actually been good. Fans do think Snyder was thrown under the bus by Warner Brothers for not being allowed to complete his story. However, I'm not so sure if this would have been a good story or good films. I think fans are upset that the film was originally marketed was severely tampered, and fans of Snyder's vision were not able to see a film he had worked so hard on. Personally, me not being a Snyder fan, I was disappointed, as I really wanted to see what was next and what he was going for. I found his films not good, but I was interested in the ideas he had. These Justice League films, whilst they do sound interesting and very ambitious, could Snyder have pulled it off? He directed Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, and both did poorly financially, poorly critically. And if Man of Steel was an MCU film, it would be the 6th lowest grossing film in the series. Not good considering you are dealing with nearly the biggest superhero in the world. I think you have to remember Snyder's first 2 films were not good, and just from a filmmaking perspective, forget about the darker tone and lack of humour, the screenplays were bad, the plots were messy and made no sense. The stories just didn't flow, everything was a big mess, and it felt like Snyder threw everything at the screen and just wanted to see what would stick. And now he is in a position where he's no longer making these films, and some time has passed, he knows what fans did and didn't like, so he's only revealing ideas he knows will receive the best possible reception. If I'm honest, I don't think the ideas stated for the planned 5-story arc Snyder has spoke about are entirely true. I think they are carefully chosen ideas Snyder has released to the public in order to gain more and more support, and I believe his Justice League trilogy would have been more of the same as per Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, a fairly cluttered mess. Warner Brothers were rushing their universe out to play catch up with the MCU, and were throwing so many ideas at the screen that everything was just a huge mess and they didn't take time to build their universe. So I imagine Snyder was again going to throw more and more things at the screen and hope he got a story out of it. This is not a clever way to build a universe. You need to take time to build characters and story arcs in order to build characters with depth and put them in these big storylines for audiences to care and be interested in. I think fans forget that Snyder's first 2 films were received pretty poorly, and just because they like the vision doesn't mean that his 5-story arc was going to work. It's very rare that sequels ever make the predecessor better because they work in a linear story, and I just think fans are holding a special place for Snyder because now he's saying all the right things when it came down to it, he wasn't making the right films and he wasn't using the correct ideas. I am genuinely curious to see the Snyder Cut of Justice League because I think it's only fair that he gets a trilogy of films that represent his vision, even though I think his vision was poor and he made bad films. I'm always interested in directors and what they were trying to make. But I think fans getting behind Snyder and saying he should have been allowed to make his Justice League trilogy have very short memories and forget that most of the ideas in his films were bad and the screenplays were just atrocious, especially Batman vs Superman. So the Justice League trilogy, everything we know, yeah, it sounds pretty good, sounds pretty cool, but I think there's a lot more that meets the eye. I think Snyder's only drip feeding good ideas out into the public because he knows what fans like and what fans want. Now he's had a few years to think about it. It is a shame we never got to see Snyder's cut of Justice League, and maybe we will one day, but I think the DCEU is heading in a much better direction now Zack Snyder is not at the helm leading this ship. Thank you for watching.